I have to be honest with you, I've never been a fan of Windows 10. Windows 10 came out at a time when I wasn't keeping too close of an eye on tech news, but I think I still heard about it before it actually came out, and I think my dumb ass was trying to download the tech preview at some point, even though I didn't have enough hard drive space to be able to install it on my piece of shit Dell Dimension. I was using Windows 7 at the time, as most people were. I had a few run-ins with Windows 8 previously, most notably when my stepmom got one of the original Microsoft Surface tablets, but I never got a chance to use Windows 8 for an extended period of time. Even if I had used Windows 8 though, Windows 10 was quite the jump from 8.1, and especially from 7. Welcome to Let's Test Operating Systems, where I review computer operating systems from the past and present. Today we're going to be revisiting one of my demons from the past that many of you are very familiar with, Windows 10. Last time I covered this was back in the stone ages of early 2016, where I gave my first impressions for the new operating system at the time, and it was nothing like what I was used to up to that point. Gone were pretty much any traces of the UI introduced with Windows Vista, replaced with a newer version of the Metro theme that I honestly think looked better in Windows 8 because it kept the button shapes from 7. The Start menu came back, which was the headlining feature for Windows 10, although they did have the option for a start screen like Windows 8 had for those that wanted to use it. The start menu isn't that great though. It's okay, it gets the job done, but it highlights immediately one of my biggest issues with Windows 10, which was the advertisements in an operating system you had to pay for. Or maybe not, because I really don't think most people actually paid for Windows 10 unless they got a new computer. You see, back in 2016, Microsoft offered a free upgrade pass to go from Windows 7 or 8.1 to 10. I assume this was to boost adoption numbers so they could say everybody was using Windows 10, and in all fairness, it was a really good strategy, but the way they did it was incredibly shady. When the program first launched, it was basically a yes or no dialog box, but as time went on, it became a yes or later box, and eventually the GWX program would just schedule a time to automatically restart and upgrade your computer, only giving the user a warning like 15 minutes before doing so. Really helpful if it happens at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're sleeping like a normal fucking human being. Following this upgrade, if you weren't happy with Windows 10 for some reason, you had 30 days to revert back to Windows 7 or 8.1, but after that, the old install deleted itself and you were stuck on Windows 10. This trend would infamously continue with the Windows Update system, which is perhaps my greatest issue with the operating system next to the extensive telemetry collected by Microsoft and a piece of software you're expected to pay them for, though I guess technically this started with Windows 8. Windows 10 removed user control over updates, automatic updates are forced on by default, and without clever hacks there's no off button. Windows 10 had a bad habit of throwing pop-ups on the screen telling you about how you need to install updates, which you can do now or later, and eventually the later button goes away and your computer restarts when it feels like it. Doing important, time-sensitive work? Fuck you, we're Microsoft and we own your computer now, bitch. Here's a couple anecdotes from my personal experience with Windows 10. Sometime in 2016, I experienced an issue where the start menu wouldn't open. Click the start button, nothing. Hit the Windows key, nothing. Restart Explorer, nothing. Log out and log back in, nothing. Force restart the computer because nothing works right, nothing. I wish I could find the tutorial I used to fix this years ago, but I tried to find the video and I only found tutorials for fixing it from like 2 years ago, because I guess they never fixed the issue. Lovely. I used to work at a hardware store with a computer system made by Epicor. The software dates back to like the 90s, and even the current versions of it still function like they were built for Windows 2000. The funniest part is, on Windows 10, the windows inside of the program still show the old Windows Basic theme from Windows Vista, since I'm guessing Windows Classic got completely eradicated from the OS at some point. Crazy considering Internet Explorer still exists for legacy reasons. Some longtime viewers may remember that I used to do a weekly live show in 2019 and 2020, which I now refer to as Superstar 64 Livestreams Classic. Every stream from like episode 33 to 83 was hosted on a mid-2012 MacBook Pro that I still have to this day. Around episode 49, I'd switched from using macOS on that computer to an install of Windows 10 1803. Or maybe it was 1809. I'm not 100% on that one. Regardless, that install was cursed, because I could never actually receive feature updates with it. Every show until 83 was done on that outdated Windows install, because every time I tried to update, it would completely brick my install and only give me a black screen with a cursor, reminiscent of booting up Windows XP. I figured despite all the issues I've had over the years, I should actually give Windows 10 one last fair shot, as when my custom-built PC had it, my experience wasn't too horrible. So against my better judgment, I took a 250GB hard drive I stole from an Xbox 360S, put it in my great-grandma's old PC, and put Windows 10 1511 on it, as well as booting up a 22H2 VM I have on my actual PC. Starting up any version of Windows 10 will present you with the exact same boot screen we first saw with Windows 8, and if your PC is password locked, the lock screen looks mostly similar to Windows 8, but some of the icons were shifted around and Microsoft has now added tips to the lock screen when you're connected to the internet. Also a feature carried over from Windows 8 is UEFI OEM logos replacing the standard Windows logo if your system supports that feature. The login prompt itself has been rearranged since Windows 8, presented more similar to something like older Mac OS but with an enlarged user icon. We now have reached the desktop and I'm getting flashbacks already, which is funny because a lot of businesses and consumers still use Windows 10. Older versions of Windows 10 had this admittedly cool looking image of the Windows logo, which somewhat mirrors the default wallpaper from Windows 7, and by default we have an all black and white taskbar. Also, if you pirated Windows 10 and or changed your hardware and or Microsoft told you to go fuck yourself, you'll see a noticeable Activate Windows watermark. I had an activated copy of Windows 7 on this HP, funny enough, but when I ran the upgrade I lost the license to Windows 10. But I've since activated the OS again and we'll leave it at that. If you have a licensed copy of Windows, you can customize the OS, so for the rest of the video I'll be using my 1511 system with the same settings I had back in 2016. Newer versions of Windows 10, starting with I believe the May 2019 update, saw the introduction of a blinding light theme, and the replacement of the default wallpaper with a light blue version. Seriously, a clean install of 22H2 was genuinely hard for me to look at, as too bright, like shining a flashlight in my eyes. I know previous operating systems didn't have much in the way of dark modes, but those systems used system colors that weren't just black and fucking white, and the skeuomorphic designs back then were a bit easier on the eyes in general. Windows XP gets a lot of shit these days for looking ugly, and while you're entitled to your own opinions that I don't agree with, Windows XP never felt like it was assaulting my sense of vision. The Windows 10 taskbar features, for some reason, a smaller Windows logo than the one from Windows 8.1, but not quite as small as the one from the original Windows 8. Also, Microsoft really tried to push Cortana back when Windows 10 launched, so they turned it on by default in this new search bar that takes up a massive amount of space, especially at lower resolutions. Other than that, it's pretty similar to what we all got used to with Windows 7, except for the new Action Center, which is a sort of consolidation of a lot of UI elements from Windows 8 into a notification button that moved in the anniversary update. The Start menu went through a number of changes over the years, and we can see the first variant in version 1511 here. One thing that stayed consistent across all versions was the live tiles that returned from Windows 8, now tacked onto the right side of the menu. Starting with the anniversary update, or 1607, the Start menu pushed the File Explorer, Settings, Power, and User Account shortcuts off to the far left, and listed all apps in alphabetical order under Recently Added, which to be fair was a welcome change because it's one less button click compared to the original. The overall layout would remain consistent into the newest versions of Windows 10. Windows 10 would also later add a separate news section into the taskbar that showed the weather most of the time, and I'm honestly not sure if anyone ever liked that at all. Honestly, a lot of the features they added later to Windows 10 just felt more invasive and as if they were trying to grab your attention away from what you were doing, which I kind of made fun of in my Doors 12 parody. Windows 10 introduced the world of Microsoft Edge, the world's most invasive piece of malware. I'm sorry, I don't like Edge at all, and I think there's a certain irony to the fact that Edge in older versions of Windows 10 is straight up broken, because all the certificates are out of date. Edge is Chromium based now, much like most internet browsers these days, but it also comes with sensory overload free of charge as soon as you open the browser. While this wasn't a problem with launch Windows 10, later versions really wanted you to use Edge, so they would throw pop-ups on the screen begging you to just use Edge because you don't need another browser. How Microsoft hasn't been sued for this yet is beyond me, but regardless, this is still a problem with Windows 11. Another complaint I have with Windows 10 is the amount of things ripped directly from Windows Vista and Windows 7. The first portion of the setup assistant is the Windows Vista setup again. The Windows 7 control panel still exists. A lot of icons were never changed. Internet Explorer still exists. All of the system accessories are pretty much unchanged, and I could go on. They have really bad commitment issues, being seemingly unable to ditch certain features because it may break compatibility for some users, despite the fact that every Windows update breaks something anyway. It just feels like everything new in Windows is stuck to something else in Windows 7 with glue, turning the whole OS into a house of cards where one small fuck up leads to... Windows used to be the industry leader. Every new release of Windows stood out from the last and brought positive changes to the user experience, even when certain versions were colossal failures. Windows Millennium Edition introduced a lot of multimedia features, while Windows 2000 was a solid release and a stable foundation. Windows XP brought a whole new user interface and made Windows even easier to use than ever. Windows Vista introduced Windows Aero, probably the most visually appealing look Windows ever had. Windows 7 introduced the Super Bar, a much improved version of the taskbar, as well as fixing all the problems people had with Windows Vista. Windows 8 brought in a more Internet of Things approach to the Windows platform, while integrating well with Microsoft's product lineup at the time. Windows 10 had quite a bit going for it, but in my opinion, the whole operating system is dragged down by just how rocky of a foundation it has, and the way it completely changed Windows for the worst. Heavy telemetry, forced updates, lack of quality assurance. This is what Windows is now, at least in my experience, and Windows 11 hasn't done anything to quite shake that feeling for me. All I see is more of the same, but now with heavier AI integration, and I'm personally pretty against generative AI as a whole. I've never liked Windows 10, and I hope I've made it clear why in this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time when we cover macOS 10, the first version.